Okay, folks, good to see you again. I have graded all of the position papers. They came out pretty good. I put a little note there for everybody. Overall, I think you did a pretty good job. Well done. So, without further ado, we're gonna go on and talk about franchising. Franchising, my former retailing teacher, Dr. Breland, once said that franchising was the greatest meeting between money and brains that you could ever find. And meaning if you had plenty of money and a little brains, it would be great. And he didn't kind of mean it in that disparaging way, but what he basically meant is that if you had money, but you didn't necessarily have the expertise, franchising was a great way to go about it. Conversely, if you are a franchisor or a corporation and you're needing to spread, franchising is great. Franchising was not an American invention. It actually comes from two words, French and English, that means free and privileged. And they came up with an amalgamation of the name franchise. But franchising is very much a system that Americans take into themselves and use as their own, because it allows you, if you have a lot of money, to be able to buy entrepreneurship and capital. It also allows you, if you are an entrepreneur but with very little money, to find a place in which you can go and be successful as well. So kind of going on that theme, I'm going to give you a little history there of franchising and where it's been successful. And we're going to take a little trip down memory lane, and we're going to talk about a couple of individuals that are kind of unique and who kind of show you franchising and what it allows, and if you are capable. So first off, I don't know if any of you recognize this particular individual. The cake is kind of a hint, but that's actually what he did with the later part of his life, not the earlier part. This is an actual person by the name of Duncan Hines. And yes, you've heard the name Duncan Hines. You've probably heard it on a cake mix or something like that. But the truth is that Duncan Hines was a real person, but he was not just the kind of cake guy, all right? So Duncan Hines actually was a salesperson. His active career was between 1910 and about 1950. And so what Duncan Hines is he was a salesperson that spent a great deal of his life on the road, maybe 40,000 miles a year. And if you consider it, his travel time was between 1910 and 1950, and he spent most of his time in a car. It kind of gives you an idea of something of the amazing aspects of this individual. So Duncan Hines used to travel with his wife everywhere. They were inseparable as a couple. And if you think about, especially during the 1920s and 30s, if you think about where America was at this time, we were just barely building roads. And so when Duncan Hines traveled across the United States, certainly there were no franchises, because franchising as a whole didn't necessarily exist at that time. And so one of the things that he did was he and his wife kept copious notes about wherever they would be. They not only did they keep notes about where they stopped, but where they ate. They talked about, or they wrote about, what is the best meal. They would write down how much it cost. They would say whether it was family friendly or not. They as individuals, as husband and wife, they were a great couple together. And so after 15, 20 years of spending time on the road, his friends would naturally turn to Duncan and his wife on recommendations like what's a good place to eat in Kansas City, or where's a great place to stay in St. Louis, they would always ask him these questions. And he realized that he really had something special. And so what he did is he started to put together a list of, of places, and he put together a book, and he called this book Adventures in Good Eating. And so he also had adventures in good sleeping as well. So he talked about places to eat, places to stop, and he published this book in 1937, was a runaway bestseller. So going along, in the 1939 edition, he has this little inset here about Corbin, Kentucky, Sanders Court and Cafe, open all year except Christmas, good place to stop en route, continuous 24 hours, sizzling steak, fried chicken, country ham, hot biscuits. What you're reading is the very first entry of this person that he met along the road. And yes, that individual happens to be Harlan Sanders. And this is the real person, Harlan Sanders. So Harlan Sanders at this time was in his, late 40s, early 50s. His wife said he'd never make anything out of himself. This was his third place to be. He had failed in 2 other businesses. And it was a rest stop, it was a garage, a gas station that had this extra place that was connected to it and allowed Harlan Sanders to stay there if he would mount the kitchen, so to speak. And so he created, this menu. He put together these things that he served. And one of the things that was on the list was fried chicken. But the difficulty with chicken, of course, is that if anyone cooks it, fried chicken takes a long time to cook, 30 minutes to say, and certainly not in a fast food environment where you're wanting your food 10 minutes at the most. But what he found was at the same time that the Chick-fil-A people did was that if you pressurized the chicken, it would cook faster. And so he started this pressurized chicken with his 11 herbs and spices or whatever, and he was being very successful. And then about the time in 1952, he had problems in his business and the location that he was at. And at that time, he took his first Social Security check, got in his car, and started selling franchises across the United States. He started this when he was 65 years old. So think about it, 65 years old, he's starting on a business. But because of franchising, he was able to be able to expand rapidly. There were 2 things that for Sanders that there were no compromise on. One was cleanliness. He demanded and required that every restaurant that was a franchise of them use stainless steel utensils and were cleaned fastidiously. And the next is ingredients. You had to have the best ingredients available. It was known in his time that Harlan Sanders had a very quick temper. He was known to pull franchise licenses in a moment. There's legends of him throwing the pots and pans into the street. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It makes for a great story. Anyway, franchising made Colonel Sanders expand rapidly. It was finally to the point when it was where he was 72 that he couldn't simply go on with the business anymore, and he sold it, and then Kentucky Fried Chicken expanded as it does today. Now, along the way, he had this individual right here who was a cook and also worked as a franchisee. And this individual said everything important about success he learned from Colonel Sanders. He actually had a couple of lessons that he taught Colonel Sanders. And so one of the things that he said is that they needed to cut down on the number of items that they had on the menu, just focus on the chicken. And he was right. The other thing he said is that he felt that Harlan Sanders in his way was iconic, and he should be in front of the counter instead of behind it. And he became an icon for himself, for KFC. And both of those things he was very successful at. When Colonel Sanders died, he sold his rights. He found that where he lived, he couldn't really get a decent hamburger, and so he started his own franchise. And he named it after his daughter had a learning disability, and she could only say a couple of things correctly. And so he named his franchise after what his daughter could say, and that's Dave Thomas. So Dave Thomas actually was a protege of Harlan Sanders. And it kind of also tells you the advantages that franchise give. It gives you this wealth of knowledge that can be passed from one individual to another. The lessons that can also be symmetric in that they can be passed from one individual to the next, and they are universal regardless of what the franchise does or sells. So I wanted to take you down this little trip down memory lane to kind of see how all those connections work together, how Duncan Hines led to Colonel Sanders, and Colonel Sanders developed that creation into Dave Thomas. And just think about all of the lives that are affected because the franchise system was available to allow these individuals with very little money, but an entrepreneurial spirit to be able to grow. Okay, so without further ado, let us move on, and we're going to talk about franchising. Okay. So, what is it about franchising? Not only what is it that makes it unique, but also what is it that makes it so successful? So there are many businesses out there that sell from manufacturer to the retailer, but what is it about franchising that makes it so unique and so special? Well, first realize this. Franchising is about when two firms are sharing a marketing channel and not one is a subsidiary of another, all right? Two organizations, all right? As far as consumers are concerned, when they buy from a franchisee, they are convinced that they're buying from a manufacturer when in reality they're buying from a separate company. A franchisor and a franchisee are two unique, independent, although interdependent corporations. The main point, especially when it comes to a franchisee, big point test, is that there is a deliberate loss of a separate identity. As far as the consumer is concerned, when I go to the McDonald's in Boone, I am dealing with McDonald's corporate. If I were to go through the driving lane in McDonald's and I was to order something, when I got to the drive-up window where I was to receive my goods, if you'll notice, there'll be a small plaque there that says owned and operated by such and such corporation, all right? The McDonald's that is being run there is run by a separate company, but the linchpin for franchises is that there is a deliberate loss of a separate identity. As far as the consumer is concerned, there is really no separation between those, okay? The franchisee assumes the identity of the franchisor. And as I said before, they come from two words, English and French, that mean both freedom and privilege separately. But the freedom is guaranteed by a special contract. They have the freedom to use your brand name, but as with everything, it comes at a cost, all right? And so that's what a franchisor or franchisee, what makes them so unique. Now, when we talk about franchising, there are actually two different types of franchising, all right? The first, okay, I'm sorry, this is also about business to business franchising, but we can go on, okay? The first franchising that we're going to talk about is the product and trade name franchising. And so what is this? A product or trade name franchising is when a corporation or a franchisor gives the franchisee the right to use their brand names in the selling of their merchandise. You know that the franchise itself is a separate identity because you can see it. And so if you were to go into town now and you were to go to Mr. Tire, you would know that Mr. Tire is not owned by Michelin or by Goodyear or Cooper Tires or any of those, but you do know that they sell them, all right? And so they are authorized franchise systems, but they don't lose the deliberate loss of their identity. And the way that the franchisor makes profit is they make a profit from the margin selling to the dealers, all right? In a product and trade name franchise, because the franchisee buys, they take both title and property that rights to it, to those items, the franchisee has the right to set prices, okay? And so in a product or trade name franchising, you will generally see trade promotions and sales promotions, buy 3 tires, get 1 free. That's an example because they take title and ownership of the products that they sell, then they resell to the consumer and they set their own prices at it, okay? So the franchisor, like a Goodyear or Michelin, they make their money off of selling to the dealerships. And then at that point, they also will provide, trade incentives and those kind of things. That's also true. But ultimately, the ultimate rights to setting prices and to advertising is by the dealership itself, okay? And so that is what a product or trade name franchise is. Examples certainly are automobile dealerships, automotive in anything, gas stations without convenience stores, and then beverage bottlers. That would be another Coca-Cola bottling company, those kind of things, okay? And you know that they're separate, they have their own unique identities. And so it tends to be more of a supplier-dealer kind of relationship, all right? They provide the supplies, they make the profits, they authorize distribution, but they don't go all of the way that a business format franchise does, okay? A business format franchise basically gives the franchisee an entire way of doing business, down to the reports that they make, all right? And so the way that they make money is through multiple things. First is they give a one-time franchise fee. The other is that generally, usually in a business format franchise, you buy supplies directly from the franchisor. That's another way of doing it. And you also, the business format franchise has much greater influence on the way that the franchisee goes about and does its business, okay? So this is the most popular way. The slide says that there are 372,842 business format franchises. You should also state that franchises don't necessarily have to be goods. They can be services. H&R Block is one. Great Clips is another. And in essence, the way that you can do that is that if I happen to be, well, Great Clips as an example, if I happen to be a barber or a hair cutter, and I have experience that way, but I'm very limited in my business experience, and I'm not saying this is how it's done there, but it would allow me to pick up the trade name and rights of Great Clips and allow me to also pay for other people to come in. And because I have that trade name, I have the power of that name itself to attract customers, okay? And so we go from a product and trade name franchise to a business format franchise. Okay, so what are the benefits to me as a franchisee? Why would I want to go into a business arrangement like this? Well, basically to the franchisee, I've got three advantages, okay? So the first one is the startup package. The first is the startup package, okay? And so if I were to go to McDonald's and I was willing to pay their $1 million franchise fee, some of the things that I would get along with it is I would get a market survey and help in site selection, where to put it. And that is a science unto itself. Also, what they will do is help with the facility design and the layout as well. Now, it used to be that McDonald's only had one layout or maybe 3 or 4 different layouts. Now they have, I think, 24, okay? And then the last thing that they will do is they will negotiate the lease. Lease negotiation. So let me give you an idea of what happens in the startup package. So you go into McDonald's, you pay the $1 million franchise fee. The first thing that McDonald's does, well, let's just say this. McDonald's has long known where they're generally looking for new locations to put places. And generally, if you're looking for a particular area, they will open that up for you, especially if they've been waiting for one. Now, along with the site selection, it also has a survey of knowing where it goes. McDonald's will also buy the property itself or lease it, okay? And so instead of, if you were to buy a McDonald's franchise, instead of you buying the land in which that building sits on, McDonald's buys the land and you buy the building. And that might sound like a convoluted way of doing business with it, but McDonald's has done very well with it, and many other corporations do the same thing. Why? Well, let me give you an example. For any of you who know the McDonald's that is here in Boone, would it surprise any of you to know that that property is worth about $1.5 million? No, I don't think it would. I mean, any of you know it. It's a pretty expensive piece of property. By the way, the Wendy's that's on the corner of Blowing Rock Road and 421, or do you know how much that is worth? That's worth about $4 million. Just the property, not the building. I have heard that that is the highest generating revenue Wendy's in North Carolina, and I wouldn't be surprised. It's the only 2-story Wendy's I know of, other than one in South Korea that I happened to visit. So, I mean, while it doesn't seem like much, or let's just say it seems like self-serving, for having a corporation to buy the property, it can mean an enormous amount to that corporation, all right? So they design the layout for you so you can choose which layout you like as well. And then they will negotiate the lease for you. And the moment that you say that, yeah, you're a franchisee of McDonald's, guess what? Your credit rating goes to AAA. So, I mean, you're sitting in the catbird seat if you're doing that. Of course, you're saying to yourself, if I'm spending $1 million for McDonald's franchise, why don't I just keep the million? Hey, there are people around playing with a lot of money, all right? And so this is the startup package. This is the first thing that you get. The next thing that you get is ongoing benefits. Ongoing benefits. And so examples of this is you will get field supervision of how you're doing. And you'll also get quality inspections to make sure that you're not only up to code with the city, county, and state, but you're up to McDonald's standards as well. You will get management feedback. Based both on observation and on the weekly reports that you're sending to them so that they know that you're doing all right. They will also send you merchandise and promotional material. Merchandise and promotional material. And then finally, management employee training. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the benefits to the franchisor, but this management training is a sword that cuts both ways, and it's valuable both for the franchisor and the franchisee. It is vitally important that management material has somewhere to go. Otherwise, it'll go somewhere else. It's as simple as that. For the franchisees, there will always be individuals in there that may be more suited to McDonald's, to the corporate, and who deserve a way into the corporate versus being there in the franchise and franchisee. And then in the very same function, the corporate individuals for the franchisor, many of them have the entrepreneurial spirit, and they would be excellent runners of franchises as well. And so there needs to be some way of passing talent back and forth together. The CEO of McDonald's from 2007 to 2010 actually started as a hamburger flipper. He went to Hamburger U, was a hamburger flipper. He worked the counter. He did all the things. He mopped the floors. He went on to business school, got his MBA, worked through McDonald's corporate, and after 25 years, he became CEO. And so that's an example of the importance of being able to have this fresh blood that flows back and forth together, all right? The last thing that the franchisee gets is a competitive advantage. A competitive advantage, okay? And what does this mean? Well, if I have problems and issues and I were by myself, I would have to turn to my own devices to be able to solve my problems. But the truth is that franchisors act as consolidators. And so as consolidators, they bring all the services that are needed under one roof. Do you have legal issues? They can help you with that. Are you finding short when you're having difficulty in doing the accounting? They can help you with that. Is it difficult to keep weekend help? They've got the answers for that. All of those things, the competitive advantages, all of those things come in and are enormous advantages for you. Key thing you got to know for the test, it's important to note that the benefits as a franchisee is that franchises are not systems for launching businesses. Franchises are not systems for launching businesses, but for running businesses. And yes, they help you to launch businesses, but their core, the thing that they do better than anything else, is they help you to successfully run them, okay? By able to bring all of this expertise to the franchisee, they are able to put all of this into one roof. It also makes sure that all of the franchisors, the franchisees play by the rules, because you're also given a territory in which other franchisees can't go, and it prevents free riding, okay? That is a big factor. A benefit that the franchisee gets from the franchisor is that they clear the ground for you and they respect your trading territory, okay? All right, so those are the benefits for a franchisee. What is the benefit of a franchisor? Okay, if I have a great idea and I want it to spread, and so I came up with the idea of Great Clips, and I have this neat little app, and I've got this way of signing people in real quick, and they can get in and get their haircuts and out of there in less than 20 minutes. And people desire that over anything else because they consider haircuts just to be haircuts. That would be an example, but how do I get this idea running, okay? The franchisor benefits because, because it allows capital to flow in quickly, all right? When speed to the market demands financial capital, this is what you get as an advantage. It allows capital to flow quickly. Now, what also happens is that in the rough and tumble world of franchising, it becomes a breeding ground for fast, effective managers. And that allows you to expand as well, because a franchise, when it comes in, they're training individuals on how to run a successful franchise. Those individuals from that corporation are more than available to be able to spin off and create new franchises as well. Local consultation and innovation. One of the difficulties about being a franchise or any corporation is that you tend to listen to the people in your own bubble. There is not the spread of wealth of ideas that you would hope for, and that's one of the difficulties. Now, with franchisees, every one of the franchise is like a little laboratory. Even if you limit your things, let's say on the menu, you still have the freedom in a franchisee to think about and experiment with new ideas. So, Louisiana is maybe not predominantly Catholic, but there's a strong Catholic influence. And so, like, given Lent, which we are in right now, and Good Friday, or excuse me, Holy Saturday, spit it out, will be April 3rd. We're still in Lent. And by tradition, Catholics do not eat meat on Friday. They will eat fish, okay? Now, I am not sure exactly where it started, whether it was Lafayette or New Orleans or whatever, but one of the local franchises there started selling filet of fish or a fish sandwich. And actually what they noticed as well is that one other independent place, a hamburger store, came up with this filet of fish idea. And it's the old saying, you know, a good idea when you steal one. And so they came up with the filet of fish sandwich. And of course, the Whaler, along with Burger King. And what happens is that in terms of the local consultation innovation, the franchisees have this local knowledge about something that gains acceptance, and the franchisor acts as a conduit for this information, and it spreads it to other locations. And so the franchisor can continually adapt, and they can gather information, and they can diffuse the best ideas to all the other franchisees, and the wealth spreads. And that is one of the advantages, okay? A franchisee also is because they own their own businesses, which is another important thing. They have inherent incentives to have success. And so when the franchisor is doing well, the franchisee is doing well. And so the inherent incentive for franchisees, better profits for better performance, the psychological factor of owning your own place. And it also helps you to keep existing managers. But also, as I said, is that the franchisors and the franchisees become great conduits for allowing human potential to flow back and forth and achieving the best overall advantages this way, okay? You move from managerial employees to self-employed franchises. The self-employed franchises bring new blood into the corporate structures. It is a very good, when it works well, it is a very good way of spreading the wealth, okay? Now, having said that, let us leave with the thought that there are reasons not to franchise. And of course, when you bring this up, you bring up Starbucks. And the truth is that Starbucks does have a few, but they happen to be very limited in scope. They happen to be especially overseas, and the franchises are little stores like the ones perhaps you see in Harris Teeter. Okay, having said that, all right, for a franchisor, franchising is not the only option, okay? Franchising doesn't deal with misdirected effort, especially when the effort is being put out. One of the difficulties also when you have a franchisee and different corporations who live under different rules is that it's easier to manage quality when it's not in a franchisor-franchisee relationship. In other words, when you own everything, you can stress quality in your own way. And what can also happen is that there can be inherent problems in the structure or the way that you do things. And because you expand rapidly, you find that you may expand quickly without ever fixing the initial problems. And so there are problems that may fester under a franchise system that can't be solved given the fact that the growth is occurring so quickly. And so you have a better system for controlling quality when it is not a franchisor system. And I don't know how far I buy that. But if you're asked on a test, that's the question, or that's the answer you use, okay? All right, I am running way out of voice right now. On Thursday, we're going to talk about termination. the contracts that have to be dealt with when we talk about terminating. We'll also talk about how difficult it can be. What are the agreements that you have to come up with? And we'll generally finish on discussion with franchising and how that works in the omni-channel environment as well. Okay, folks, have a great afternoon. And we will finish this all on Thursday, and y'all take care, okay? Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.